Over the past few months, I have been shooting more and more film lately, and I've actually found it to be quite an enjoyable experience because film is pretty awesome to shoot with. However, a while back, more like a couple of months, I was rummaging through some old charity shops because sometimes you can find some gems in them, some old photo gear. One thing I've actually found in a charity shop before is this, which is a Minolta Roker 50mm f1.7 lens. It's not a bad little lens. I've adapted it here to my Sony camera, but this was like €5 in a charity shop, so sometimes you can find some gems. One of my little charity shop finds was this. It's a Minolta Vectus 20, and I spent a grand total of €2 on it. And it is a compact point and shoot film camera. But what makes this one kind of unusual, and the reason I'm bringing it up in a video is because it's not actually that brilliant, is that it doesn't actually take the 35mm film that we're all used to shooting. So if you open up the film door, it doesn't fit. The can won't fit in here. That's because it doesn't take 35mm film, it takes APS film. An APS film is a smaller film format that was developed as the Advanced Photo Systems, where the name APS comes from. And it was this sort of film system that Kodak and Canon and Nikon, Minolta and a bunch of other manufacturers got around to jointly create this giant sort of film system that would be easier for consumers to use. So everything from the cartridges being much smaller, more durable, the film was more durable, the cameras could be smaller, and the idea was that you just load the can in. There's no like winding it and spooling the film like on old SLRs. You just pop the film in, the camera handles everything. When it's done, it rewinds back into the can. You bring this to the lab, you get it processed, you get back your negatives in the can, which is kind of unusual. And once you do all of that, you get your prints, and everything was this like streamlined system, this high-tech, cool system. The only problem was that APS died very, very quickly, and the reason for that is digital. Digital cameras came along, and because the APS film size was smaller than 35mm film, the manufacturers had actually gotten behind this so well that they had developed all of these small film format cameras. The Canon Ixus, that Minolta, Vectus, a lot of point and shoot cameras, but there was also some APS SLRs like the Nikon Pronea series. And the idea behind this was that you'd use the smaller film. When digital sensors came along, well, all they had to do was get an APS sized digital sensor and drop it into the camera and put the processing in there and take out all the film winding. Because at the time they were actually starting to develop lenses dedicated to this smaller format, which have now evolved into, in the Nikon's cases, the DX line of lenses, and I believe Canon has their own APS line of lenses. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Sony has the E-mount line of lenses, which are APS, but then there's also the full frame ones, and Sony's lens mount is kind of confusing. That's completely beside the point. But that is why APS died, because digital just came along and made things easier. And at that point, the manufacturers had gotten so good at making small, high-quality lenses, and the motors in like the point-and-shoot cameras had gotten good enough. There was just no need to use it. But now that we have an old camera and I've managed to find some film on eBay, what's it actually like to shoot with? Well, to do that, I took the camera out for a day, popped in a roll of film, and went shooting. We're out here in the canal, and I've got the Vectus right here with the roll of 40 exposure something Voltgander film I ordered from Germany. I actually have no idea about this film. I know it's C41 because that's what all the APS films were, as far as I can tell. Hey, it's a bird in that tree, picking at something. Let's see if we can get a picture of him. I've enjoyed using this little camera. However, it's loud. The flash is super obnoxious, like holy crap. Because the flash here will literally pop up for like everything and there's no way to pin it down. Even if you turn the flash fully off and it keeps resetting itself each time you turn it off, by the way. It's super annoying. It doesn't stay down, so I was thinking about putting a bit of tape on it if I go to use this again, because I have got those other 3 rolls of film. I might have to use those up. But it's quite a nice little camera. I kind of want to buy a compact, and it's winding itself in now, but I kind of want to buy a compact 35mm film camera now. You know, Contax T, T2 or a Rio G1, Rio, I don't know what the hell they're called. Of course, the problem with those cameras is they're super expensive. I was also looking at like rangefinders and stuff. I really want like a small compact film camera, because I really do like it. I have the Canon A1 in the bag as well with some slide film, which I was using, and it's so heavy compared to this, so I can see why these IPS cameras are actually quite popular in Europe, I believe. And she's rewinding like a maniac. Okay. Oh, she's rewound. I suppose that means I can take the film out. So here's the can of film. And what's interesting is on the bottom of the can here. And the idea is that this is an indicator for what condition the film is inside. So number 1 is unexposed film. Number 2 is partially exposed, and that's because some fancier APS cameras could actually stop the roll halfway, rewind it, you could switch rolls, and then you could resume your old roll back at the original frame, which is just kind of awesome. Then you've got 3, which is exposed fully but not processed. And then you've got number 4, and number 4 means fully processed and there are developed negatives inside. So APS cameras actually had kind of a cool feature, which was kind of pointless, but it was neat. And that was the ability to shoot in 3 different modes. You could shoot in the classic mode, which is a 3x2 standard frame mode. The high definition mode, which was the highest definition version of the film, the 16:9 mode. And then you could also shoot a panorama mode. And one unusual thing about this particular little camera is that it actually crops the viewfinder when you switch between the modes, which is actually really cool. You're not actually changing the size of the exposure on the film. It's not like because the film goes through horizontally and you shoot in panorama, it's going to suddenly shoot a much larger area of film. No, it doesn't do that. All it actually does is write the data to the magnetic strip on the film as to which mode you're using, and then it's cropped in processing and printed as a panorama or as a classic. Let's break open this can of exposed film and let's take a look at the actual film and the negatives inside. Oh, she's coming apart. All right then, let's take a look inside. Let's take a look. So here's the roll of film. Unravel the film. And this is actually a 40 exposure roll, which I didn't know was a thing. Let's have a look at them side by side. So here we have some negatives on my pseudo light table, which is actually just an LED light. But we can see, you know, standard 35mm. We've got our, you know, data lines. We've got our frame numbers. And you'll notice the frame numbers aren't exactly matched because each camera has, you know, slightly different winding mechanisms for 35mm film. And also notice the gap between the frames is actually a little larger on 35. You can see when we get to APS that there's like no gap at all. If we take a look here at number 25, we can see we've got our marker, we've got our data strip here. So these are the data strips that would have been written to by the camera in order to dictate whether or not it was a panorama or whatever. So the actual negatives aren't cropped at all. But look how close each frame is to the next. Like, that is some crazy low tolerances inside this camera. And if that's the same for all the cameras or all APS cameras, you could actually save a considerable amount of film production compared to the gaps in the 35mm. Like, that would add up very quickly. Yeah, this film, like, it's obviously very small. Like, let's get the negatives here for 35. There we go. You can see the frame area is like much larger on the 35. Taller. It's also considerably wider. So, not a fan of the APS film, but it's kind of a cool film. It's made out of a thicker kind of denser plastic, so it's very grey coloured. So if we compare that to the 35, you can see how they're 2 different colours, they're 2 different materials. So overall, was APS film a better film stock or a better film system compared to 35mm? And the answer is no. Apparently at the time, I couldn't really find much reliable information, but according to the internet, APS film was apparently quite expensive at the time compared to 35mm. It was a lower quality format, and while it did allow for smaller, cheaper cameras, the cameras had a lot of motors and winding parts, and they did have, apparently some cameras were notoriously unreliable. But there were some cool innovations. The cropping thing, while not really a great innovation, was kind of neat and nice and automatic. Having the negatives stored was nice. The archiving system built into it was nice. But overall, I don't really enjoy the APS film system. I'd much rather shoot the 35mm film. That's it. That is APS film. A film format that lasted for just over a decade before being killed off by better technology. If you like the video, there is an option down to like it down below. There's that subscription thing you can do. That's it for this video, guys. I'll see you next time.